Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupastiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karva Bahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And with those two brief Sanskrit slokas, we enter into a 4-series class whose title contains that word pramana, which is the last word I used in that sloka by Shankara out of the Vivekuchunamani. Shrutayaha Pramanam. Pramana, as you see here, is proof, and Shruti is revealed scriptures. So the revealed scriptures are the proof of the existence of divine reality. So the 6 proofs of truth, a subject that we haven't taken up for 3 years now, because last time I presented it to you, we were not in this building, in this particular ashram, but it was a black and white version of this chart you were seeing. And we were presenting it in the last class, the last half of the class. Actually, if you're looking on YouTube and you want to look it up, it's 32b, the numbered version. So you can look back on that and see, as a review if you like. I took the chart in just a 1-hour sweep. We're going to take 4 classes and to do it this time, but of course have re-looked at 32b myself and seen how it could be expanded. And I noticed that even back then I was taking it out of the realm of philosophical debate and dryness and intellectualism and rationalism and pragmatism and all of these things in which not only Western scholars, but even Indian scholars and priests and intellectuals have been tied up in for a long time. It's just that in India, they're not arguing about the proof of truth, whether God exists or not. They've already come to know that existence is God, if you want to put it Advaitically. All of existence is God. So it's proof of itself. To realize that in nature, in Maya, with all the limitations of the 5 elements and 5 senses and the varying states of your consciousness, like dreaming, fantasy with desires, making a living, raising a family. We could go on and on with all of these conditionings and overlays over the formless reality that set us apart from our true nature. if we don't proceed cautiously or carefully. So in their compassion, in India, the 6 proofs of truth were not just an intellectual system in order to try and convince you of the existence of God. That should be obvious. And then to the devotees, it is. I mean, basically you have vile beings, the violent, the evil, and doing heinous acts and so forth, with no compassion. Krishna describes them in the Gita in his chapter on the division between the divine and the demoniacal. And then you have a cross-section of beings who are just worldly, sort of like happy little children not knowing the dangers around them. And you have a cross-section of beings that are moral, religionists, and but usually rather narrow, hunkered down to their one religion as if they couldn't look outside and see God everywhere. You step up from that, you've got what we call the devotees of God, and the devotees don't really need any proof of God. You might say they're born with God inside of them, and they feel it. I know I did all my young life, even in my preteens. I would go around talking to God, and I didn't want to let anyone know that later because Western psychologists would think there's something wrong with me. But then I read the Gospel of Ramakrishna, and he was always talking to divine reality. And I thought, oh, well, that must mean it's okay if he does it. So whether you pray or even closer in, you actually talk to that soul as if it's your companion. We call it the eternal companion in our tradition. Beautiful book, by the way, about Swami Brahmananda, the Jagat Guru of the Ramakrishna order, the world teacher, called the eternal companion. And so that cross-section of beings, and deeper, beyond the devotees, there would be the saints and seers, the realized souls, and the Advaitists and so forth, who have had non-dual samadhi, nirvikalpa, or asampratyata. So there's a cross-section of beings here. If you look just on this Burloka, the physical realm, you see that there's 4 or 5 too. There's human beings, animals, insects, plants, and microorganisms. So there's a cross-section of beings right here. So this plane of existence is multifaried. So why shouldn't it be with the kingdoms of heaven also inside? It'd be rather segmented. And of course, this is where you go inward to find these truths. And that's precisely what the rishis of India did when they would come up with a system like this. They went inward. They checked with other sources. And that's one of these, Shabda. And they actually, if you want to have it in a kind of order, because the difference between 32b, which was 3 years ago, I just presented them left to right. But then yesterday I did a kind of what they call samyama in yoga, a real concentrated inward manana, if you will, on these 6. And I thought, how can I put this in today's language, in today's cultures, this particular age, that it might occur to people in some sort of order, because I wasn't doing that back 3 years ago. So I thought if I took these 6, put them in some sort of order, that would be a way to present this. And I also wanted to present it in a hands-on way, because it can end up being just philosophical and intellectual and good information, or maybe be useful to people dharmically. But we wanted to turn it into what Swami Vivekananda described as living philosophy. That's what's going to empower religion and defeat irreligion, he said. So you're armed to the teeth with this kind of philosophy, and so you should know its movements inside of the grand philosophy of Vedanta. There are dynamics going on, just like inside of this planetary life there are many dynamics going on that you don't see and know, and you come to study them and look at them. So if I were to put these 6, and we can go through them to give you an introduction to them right now, in an order, there you see all. I probably should say first that other systems in India had different ideas. Like here the Puranas had 2 proofs of truth. Now they hunkered it down or condensed it down to just hearsay or tradition and sakshi, witness. They made it very simple in the Puranas in a very early time. They said, oh, you want to know the proof of God and existence? You have some doubts here? Well, listen to what my guru says here. Listen to what this great seer Vashishta said. Or listen to the avatars and what they say. And that should be good enough for you. That's hearsay. They say, I hear. It should be say here, actually. It was in a better order. But that matches very much up here with verbal testimony, you see. Across the board, the other proof in Purana was witness consciousness. Now, that's a very high thing. It's actually more like your own perception. So these were kind of conclusions in the Puranas that would allow you to determine the nature of reality and study it, observe it, to convince yourself, because let's face it, beyond belief is faith. Mere belief, they call it in my tradition, isn't enough, because it can be shaken. It can be shaken by someone who's smarter than you, or it can be shaken by someone who's of a different religion, or any number of things can come along. An atheist come along and talk you out of your belief. But faith won't be shaken. So when we talk about faith, it must be that somebody has thought deep enough about the nature of reality to not only have accepted it verbatim would be a good word for hearsay, or written scripture. Another is not just spoken but written. And then accepted it maybe on a very deep level of connecting with it. You see, the oneness of all things. So if you're shy about those kinds of things and you stand back, it's like the old joke of the ticklish bread dough. You see, the ticklish bread dough said to the baker, "Hands off." But then the hand said, "But we need you." And so they all became one in the end. So you have to get over your ticklish stage and enter into the sense of oneness around this, you see. And if you were to do this kind of study from the standpoint of oneness, then you would be one of these higher level of beings that came into the body-mind mechanism with a pure mind and with advanced knowledge. Actually, that would be, would follow some of these other proofs up here that we'll get to. But usually that's not the case. People have to strip away coverings here on earth, especially in this day and age. So here's what the order I decided to put this in. So I decided to put Anumana first. If you want, you can see down here, Anumana says, the word we're using up here is analogy or similitude. So you see here, attainment of knowledge by comparison or similarity. So you have, it would be like saying he shines like the sun or something, you see. That's an analogy, right? He's not actually the sun, but he shines like the sun. So you're using some sort of way to explain that via analogy. And so we're calling that knowing after. They call that in the tradition. It's knowing after. So most people proceed that way. They know after. They really should know before. It should be precognitive. That's the way the luminaries enter into this whole shooting match, this mess of Maya. Nature, form, and all the things I just described a few minutes ago, and how they take them on with a precognitive knowing. Basically, that's been condensed down to Brahman is real, the world's unreal. Or the world is a dream, or the world's an illusion. They haven't had a problem with that statement. They've just decided that that's the conclusion of it. Then they got the chaff away from the wheat, and then they enjoyed the wheat. They got God separate from mammon, and they enjoyed God in their lives without the overlays of the aforementioned problems that come about. So knowing after, usually people proceed by moving blindly into their lives. So they're born, they don't know where they came from, they don't know where they're going, they're not even sure there's a meaning to their life. And even if they're born with parents who are religious and so forth, they have doubts. And they're here to prove something to themselves, they don't know what it is. And they don't find out till after. So everything is a knowing after. And I have some charts to show you about that. I won't dwell on each one of these, but you'll see how each one of these measures up in a brief definition. So I'm calling that really the first order of the proofs of truth. People will usually proceed by anumana, knowing after. Now the next is upamana, or upamana if you wish, similitude and analogy. So you see here, it says you observe, compare, and then conclude. So that would be a second way. If they came about through anumana, knowing after, it's a means of getting knowledge, lower knowledge from higher knowledge, actually, if you want to put it that way. You know our old chant, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma sadgamaya. You go from lower truth to higher truth. So that's the first step. You see, the second step would be then coming to this, what I was saying, similitude or analogy. You observe and you compare, and it's a kind of a step along the way. You see, after you're already embarked, a step along the way after you've embarked. So hopefully you will observe and you will compare by analogy, and then you can make a conclusion based upon that. You can step forward. The third is up here, artapati, presumption. So it says here, assumption of a known fact in order to account for an unknown fact. So I've always described this as if you sit on the fence too long and don't make a decision, then you don't choose. You've heard the grass is greener on the other side, so you don't ever make the jump to find out. In fact, you may jump back to your old haunts because of habit. So in this case, you want to use what we call circumstantial implication in philosophy. The circumstances imply something. I've always said, like, if there's a creation out here, there must be a creator. So that should launch you on the right track to find the source of everything. And you're going to have to look deeper than just the physical level and the Big Bang, for instance. Philosophy wants to take you to the source of the Big Bang and the source of the atomic particles and the source of quantum physics, and that's going to be a journey that goes within, not backwards in time or upwards in space. So time and space are not going to give you the final answer. In fact, these are part of the mind's thinking process, time and space. When it comes out of the formless Brahman and takes a form, it takes an ego, and then it takes intelligence, and it takes a mind, if you know your 24 cosmic principles. And by that time, it's already beginning to think in a certain round of ideation that's closing space. You see, space is boundless, but you want to try and make it your own. You see, there's a story Yoga Vasishtha teaches about that, enclosing space, or the philosophical teaching of space inside of a jar, if you've heard of that. You see, there's space inside the jar, space outside the jar. They're both the same space, but you have to break the jar to make them one. So this enclosing of space is the jar of body-mind mechanism, and you've put it together, and it's all its composite parts, the fourfold mind and so forth. And then that's where you begin to look at these proofs of truth, that knowledge is going to come after you do that. Knowledge of what you did is going to come after you do that. Or, as I said, it's going to be there precognitively. That would be more like perception. Let me read you this lower chant here. Knowledge has come to the soul in two ways, i.e., through the instrumentality of the four inner faculties, antakarana, and through the five states of consciousness, that receive their source material from the five senses. Further, knowing is not a self-contained process, for it receives its initiative and its direction from God. This is the Shaiva Siddhanta Darshana, Shaivism, that's telling you this. God activates the soul and causes it to know, in the same way the soul activates the five organs of senses and causes them to know. So your antakarana is your soul, your body-mind mechanism, and it's connected to the five senses, so it activates them, causes them to get knowledge from the outside. That's one way knowledge comes to us. So it's coming from the outside in. This other way is to know that knowledge is already within the soul, as Vivekananda used to say so good. Remember that quote where he says, education is just is the knowledge of is knowledge. Knowing knowledge is already within you. See, it's a manifestation of knowledge already within you. Education. So you're going into an education in this country thinking that you have to get knowledge when it's already there. And so those beings who know that it's already there will come into the antakarana, fourfold mind. That's the first encasing of space and time, knowing this already. In other words, they take on a mind composite, a body-mind mechanism, or a psychophysical being, for the express purpose of expressing Atman. So they already know the knowledge to be known. That's a quote out of the Gita. I'll show you a chart on that later. What is the knowledge and the knower and the knowledge to be known? Those three things have to be, the triputi have to be put together. And when you see the list of Sri Krishna's knowledge that's to be known, and put it next to what Western knowledge is, you'll see the vast difference. The essential things to know are not about matter and pleasure and domination and things like this. Essential things to know are about devotion, love, compassion, and these higher attributes and qualities that are part of the human heart. So I'm using this quote at this time from the Shaiva Siddhanta Darshana to explain a bit this idea about circumstantial implication, arthapati. We could call it assumption as a way of progressing. You're assuming a thing to be true, and even if it's not true, later on you find out it was not true or half true, or somebody corrects you, you still made progress by getting off the fence. See? So some teacher, I've seen this happen so often, people who are devoted to some path and some teacher bring a friend, and that friend listens. Maybe they're impressed a little, maybe not, or maybe they're thinking inside themselves, what does he or she know? I know better. And they go away and they don't come back. So they assume that they know this already, but they're not waiting for the implications of the circumstances that they just went through to manifest themselves in their lives. So in the opposite case, a person who is very attracted would come back again and again whenever those classes were given, whenever that teacher was speaking, whenever that path was being elucidated upon, and go deeper and deeper into it. So this is the way that you would use assumption as a way of progressing. So it's one of the valid proofs of truth, because it points to the fact that there's, again, somebody doing the assumption. There's some force inside of you that's assuming this to be true or not true. So there's always this sakshi. That's why shabda and sakshi are the higher proofs. I haven't even arrived at shabda yet, because it's really something that occurs later, after knowing after happens. You'll see some of these explained as I show you 2 or 3 charts on each one of these. That's what the series of 4 classes is going to be about. When we start back on Anumana, then we're going to take up some charts that have to do with inference, and we can see how that explains it better to us. So now we've gone through 3 in order, right? So now 4 is Shabda. which I just mentioned. It's verbal and or written testimony. Remember, these prove the existence of existence. It's kind of a silly thing not to believe the existence of existence when you exist. Nobody says, I don't exist. Everyone says, I exist, even the atheist. Remember, one Swami used to say, talk to atheists, and they'd come and they will prove to me, and the Swami would say, do you have a mother? And the atheist would have to say, well, yes. Did your mother have a mother? So really what you're saying is, do you have ancestors? You've come from somewhere. And the ancestors have passed, and you're continuing on their line. Even the worldly person wants to have a son or a daughter, or children to carry on the line of whatever they're doing, doctors, lawyers, whatever. So it begins to send them on a tract that traces origins back to a source. And the tracing of origins in India, of course, is an art form in itself. It's called utpatti. It's the same word as artapatti in its last, so its last syllables there. So tracing of origins is a way to get to the deeper truths of the matter. And the problem with tracing your ancestry is that you're thinking it's going back in time in a linear line backwards. So they don't exist anymore. But if you think of your ancestors the way they do in India, you're tracing your lineage and your heritage back to your spiritual path. That's the blessing of having a spiritual path given to you when you're young. And you're giving it to your child, or your father giving it to you, and your grandfather giving it to your father. If you had that all the way through many lifetimes, as they have in India, then you wouldn't be in this quandary, and you could come up with a system like this to help people who are ignorant of it. See, we're still having a problem with the fact that the ancestors are actually back inside and not back in time, and they're not up in space either. So time and space will leave you high and dry if you take them only on the physical level. You have to consider subtle time and subtle space as if it were in dream tonight, how malleable it is, how it expands and contracts and so forth. So Shabda just is, can you hear the words coming out of my mouth right now? This is Shabda, what I'm saying. It's a verbal testimony given by a teacher who is ensconced himself in Dharma very deeply for 50 years, and probably lifetimes before that, to try and bring out these hidden facets or qualities in each individual soul, to manifest the Atman, as Vivekananda used to say. So, written testimony too, like we just said, Shrutayaha Pramanam, we chanted. The testimony of the non-dual scriptures is very important. So you're going to want to hear the slokas and memorize them, and use them, manana, do your manana on them, then use them for inspiration. So let's just call Shabda transmission from the wise in order to awaken. It shouldn't be looked at as just mere teachings. It's an actual transmission, and our founder, like Sixon here, SRV Associations, used to tell us that all the time. You're getting a transmission when you go hear Swami Sheshanandaji, peace be upon him, speak. You're sitting in his presence. You're getting a transmission, so open your nadis. Even if you didn't open your nadis, he'd open them for you sometimes by this transmission that he would send your way. So Shabda is courting very closely to perception. You see divine perception, which comes next. So you can see why I put this in a kind of order. I hope you're following this. It may be the drier aspect of these four classes to explain this first. But if you get the ground of it first, when you look at the charts, then you'll be able to delight in the teachings and how they explain each one of these 6 proofs of truth. So hold on with me here while we finish this introduction. Remember, this is meant not for just the sake of philosophy, or definitely not for argumentation by Tarkika Buddhi. What's Tarkika Buddhi? Argumentative intellect. So they have a word or two words for it in Tantra in India. It's one of these 16 evolutes of Maya, is that they came upon people with just argumentative intellects. They didn't care if what you were saying was true or not. They just wanted to argue. So you'll have that as a part of your inheritance when you're trying to express these, but that really gets beside the point. What we're wanting to use these for as tools, like paints in a paint set or tools in a toolbox, that we can put up against anything that comes our way in Maya. I remember the proof of truth, it's shabda, hearsay, or how I have to infer the presence of something. You see, if there's smoke on yonder hill, there must be fire. So if there's a creation here, there must be a creator. So if anyone tells you otherwise, you go back to the proof of truth and you disprove it right there. Because this is based upon thousands and thousands of years of knowers of truth. So don't use hearsay in the old sense of the word in English, as saying, oh, it's just mere hearsay. This is philosophical hearsay. This is direct spiritual experience hearsay, and we're getting to that when we get to pratyaksham. That's next in 5. So you might say the soul is coming here not knowing, and then it's going to know later. Then it's using analogy or similitude to proceed. And then it's having circumstances and making assumptions on the circumstances that will get it off the fence and lead it further. And then finally it comes to a teacher that gets verbal and written testimony. And then it starts to get its own direct perception, and that's what pratyaksham is. Immediate cognition via mind and senses. So yes, down here we had the fact that probably the way of lower knowledge is to get knowledge through the senses to the mind. It would be very helpful for people who are pursuing a spiritual path if they got knowledge from their own mind and then gave it to the senses, which is what's happening to people who are renounced or who are detached, or, like I said, who made the conclusion a long time ago that the world was a dream, and they're just entering into a mass collective mental dream when they enter into people's dreams. When they take a body, they're taking a body in a great mind that's a mass collective mental dreaming going on, with many echelons of beings involved in it. And you can't discount them because they exist, or they once existed. That gets here. Non-apprehension is the 6th. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but say, if I go into a room and I see something, I walk out, somebody moves the thing, and I go in and see it's not there, then I make the conclusion that it was once there, so it existed. See, so its non-appearance proves its existence. So this is the highest and non-dual. I put it number 6. It's the highest and most non-dual of all ways of proceeding. That, like we were talking on the way here about people who believe in the void, nihilists. So immediately, just like saying, "Oh, you have a mother, don't you?" See? So for the nihilist, you'd say, "Well, how do you know there's a void?" And because there was a witness to the void, and you have a word that you gave for the void after you witnessed it. See, so it points back to 2 of these truths right away. You're inferring the fact that there's a void. You're using similitude. You're using your own perception, and then you've got the hearsay of the saints and rishis behind you, corroborating this. You see, and so you're not left helpless in the lurch in front of a bunch of materialistic non-believers who have nothing more on their mind than matter and pleasure, and probably ways of getting more of that by dominating over other nations. So it really defeats materialism at its root, and it really shows you the way off of the Bhoga Marga, the path of pleasure, and onto the path of knowledge. We'll look at that when we go back. So actually I jumped ahead to Anupalabdhi number 5, which I'm calling precognitive knowing. So back with Anumana, it was knowing after. So you thought you didn't know something, but then all the knowledge was in you, because that's one of the 7 rules of yoga. All knowledge lies within you. It's kind of like Jesus telling the disciples, the kingdom of heaven is within you. All knowledge lies within you. So if you had have been told that early on, you would go searching it inside and not just outside. Or what you did find outside would be corroborated by what's inside. And you'd have a connected way of knowing. And you'd have a much better chance then of knowing the knower, which is Sakshi again, the witness consciousness. So it's a way of defeating all sorts of usurpers and getting out of the way all sorts of distractions. The mind should go straight to the point. If thine eye be single, you should know the truth. So it should have the ability to cut through, like a Swami Vivekananda mind. See? Because even devotees want to know the truth, you see. So even the devotees of the Lord who take up divine forms as their ideal, they also have philosophical leanings and they ask questions. Maki amar kalore shama, Maki amar kalore, Maki amar kalore shama, Maki amar kalore, kalorupe digambari, hridaya kare kalore, kokono purusha, kokono prakriti, kokono shunya rupare, kokono prakriti, kokono purusha, kokono shunya rupare, kamalakanta o baba babiye, sahaje paga holore shama, Maki amar kalore shama, Maki amar kalore. And a beautiful song, Kamalakanta, one of the great devotees of Mother Kali, is, sometimes I wonder about you, Mother Kali, are you really black? My mind has become illumined by meditating on your feet. And so he wants to know, even if he's a devotee of a form, might say Kali, of course, being a formless form, a very powerful form. And so he says by inference, you see, some people say she's black, but other people say she's not always so. Sometimes she seems white or yellow or red. So like in the red Tara or the yellow Tara or the black Tara in Tibetan Buddhism. So he's thinking similitude, and he's thinking analogy. His mind is naturally going towards these. And then he does asks the real question. Before I did not know what you were, Mother, and reflecting upon you, and this would then infer verbal testimony and scripture, reflecting upon you, my whole life has passed away in thinking about you. So now I know your secret. So he comes to perception, you see. Now I know your secret, that sometimes you're black and sometimes you're white, sometimes you're male, sometimes you're female, and sometimes you don't have any form at all. non-apprehension. So you might, in just a song, you could say long generations of Indian thinkers who blended Jnanam with Bhakti have come up and used this in the most natural way. If you want to go ferret it out of the scriptures, and like I did, find it somewhere, I found this in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, a book that thick, over 1,000 pages, where the Divine Mother herself is talking about the 6 proofs of truth. Now, when I read that book decades ago, read it from cover to cover, then I marked that. You say, I marked the book because I knew I'd probably never go back and read that whole thing again. Although if you read it once, it says it'll give you freedom, and if you read it twice, it'll give you freedom plus, and then plus plus. So I marked all that, and I actually put it on a computer file so I could look it up quick, because too many pages to try and find it, even with markings. So that's where I found the 6 proofs of truth, and then meditating upon them, like I would meditate upon Kali because it's her wisdom, Divine Mother wisdom, then I've come to these conclusions. So it goes, Kakono Purusha, Kakono Prakriti. Sometimes you're the soul, sometimes you're nature. Sometimes you're formless, sometimes you're with form. Sometimes you're sentient, sometimes you're insentient. That is, you take on insentiency. When you take on insentiency, the whole world becomes deluded. They think they're insentient. They think they're the body, because you have a body, you see. So this might be another example of similitude. Since you're that way, I should be similar. I should also be that way. But then, if she has higher wisdom, you too should seek higher wisdom. Lower truth to higher truth. And so that brings us back to the top. But let's not forget number 5, because we didn't do it fully. Pratyaksham is direct perception, immediate cognition via mind and senses. So that says here, direct immediate cognition, external and internal, by the 10 senses. So the 10 senses, you'd say, gee, we only have 5 in here in the West. What happened? Where'd you get these other 10? Can I have them? Yes, they're in my dream sleep tonight. They're connected to tanmatras, which are called 5 subtle elements. Water had a source, earth had a source, fire had a source. They were in my thoughts. When I thought fire, then it came out and turned into fire here. In fact, fire turned into 1 billion suns. He shines with the light of 1 billion suns, the Ishvara. So that's similitude. You see, that's like analogy. His compassion is as great as an ocean. You see. So you're using the ocean as a metaphor to try and explain something that's vast and boundless. And they've used this in songs for inspiration, and in poetry, and their scriptures are even full of it. Vedanta is well known for slokas that not only are profound in their knowledge and wisdom, leading to non-duality, but they're also graced with beauty and lyricism and melody and harmony and analogies that are easy help the mind grasp divine reality, which sometimes is very abstruse, admittedly. So there you see the 6 proofs of truth put in a kind of order due to what I was thinking yesterday. I think I want to present them the way it happens to people. Basically, you can say, I'm born blind. Everyone's born blind here. Seems like even the avatar is born blind. There are veils in front of everyone. And as if taking on the body is a very serious matter. And so you get into the body and you have to develop it, and the senses have to develop, and then you have to remember all this wisdom later. So all people are starting pretty much at the Anumana stage. They're knowing later. All their immediate knowledge is put off, isn't it? and it won't come back to them till they get perception. So you've got 4 steps yet, and the next one would be looking around and seeing things and comparing. You see, like analogies. You look around, you see, my teacher is a great knower of Brahman. His knowledge is as vast as the ocean, like I said, so I should then use that as an analogy so I get this vast knowledge. In fact, that's exactly what we did with Swami Sheshanandaji and what he did with Swami Sharanandaji when he met him, Sri Ramakrishna's direct disciple. So we trace our lineage back to these great knowers of Brahman that were born with this knowledge or had it swiftly awakened once they came into this body-mind mechanism, and their path took them directly to Sri Ramakrishna. It's like iron filings to a magnet. If they're born, if they're strewn a little far away, then just move the magnet a little bit and they'll come zipping back. But you don't want to lose your charge. You see? And in a sense, this would be like getting your charge back if you've lost it. See, well, then I'll use some of these tools in this toolbox to bring me straight back to the core meaning of my life and absolute courage of my convictions. Even that might be falling a little short of the truth. I had to have courage to get my convictions back. That's a little bit distant still from the fact of I am. In one of these verbal testimony, I'll show you some of the Mahavakyas, how certain they are about this truth, and how they didn't expand it into huge systems full of details that were Mayic. They instead went from the general and came down to the specific and came down to the non-dual and finally just put it down into a few words for you. So the verbal testimony then ended up, I am that, or that thou art, or aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman. So the person then gets through analogy, gets circumstantial evidence. The implications are there. And they're still using assumption, you see. And that's a belief turning into faith. Then finally, verbal testimony comes to them in the form of a teacher. Sometimes it might be an inspirational teacher who is not even speaking Dharma yet. You're getting a teacher from lower knowledge, and that inspires you, so you remember that teacher. But all knowledge, all action must lead to knowledge, and all lower knowledge must lead to higher knowledge, and all higher knowledge must lead to truth. The West is a good example of knowledge not leading to truth, and Krishna says in the Gita that knowledge that doesn't lead to truth is dangerous. It'll sit for a while, and it'll settle. It'll get begin to get old and tired and decrepit, or it'll become dangerous. So it needs to lead you on to the highest truth. So that's what would happen when you hear someone who has the truth, verbal testimony, shabda. And then you would get your own direct perception from that, prakjaksham. And then finally you would have this precognitive knowing. And even the void wouldn't put you off, or nihilism, or the atheist, or emptiness. I mean, remember sometimes when we were studying the philosophical systems and we came up in India and we came upon Buddhism and their emphasis was on shunyata, we had to think about that for a while. And we thought it's really not that much different than the neti path of Vedanta, that you're negating things. You're stripping it all away to a kind of nothingness or emptiness. But you saw that there's a lot of difference between nothingness or nihilism and emptiness, shunyata. That emptiness just means stripped away of everything but reality. But void means, nihilism means there is nothing. As if nothing is possible. So this is also how the rishis viewed time. Finally they said, oh, forget it. we're tired of counting the years, yugas, mahayugas, manvantaras. Let's just call it eternal. It's going on in cycles all the time. And once they made that conclusion through all of these proofs, it was then that they could say time is eternal and I can get off the circle. You see. I mean, you have these kind of ideas, and may the circle be unbroken. Buddha didn't think that way. You sit around in the 60s going to campfire girls or Boy Scouts or something, you know, or a nice New Age party, may the circle be unbroken. What are you saying? Let's break the circle. Break the cycle completely. That's how people get free. It's called moksha and mukti. We don't have words like that in our language. All we have is salvation. And that freedom takes us to heaven, and that heaven has forms in it. And those forms are based in Maya. All forms are based in Maya. And forms are based in time and in space. And they have cause and effect coming from them. If you take a form, he so wears the form must wear the chain. Too true. But far beyond both name and form is Atman. So you break the cycle, you snap the chains of rebirth with your ancestors and go beyond the gods, goddesses, which are powers within you, in order to get free. Moksha, mukti. There's nothing like that in any tradition, in any country, philosophies that I've ever found except in Vedanta, and particularly in Advaita Vedanta. Almost every other darshana in India and all other religions of the world don't have what Advaita Vedanta has in that one sense. It's that ultimate freedom, which is the very foundation of your existence. It is existence with a capital E. From that, you're the witness. Otherwise, you're behind the 8 ball all the time of form and dependent on something. So that's why Vivekananda said it's the most freeing philosophy that man ever knew, that the world ever experienced or heard. Shabda, they heard it, see. So we must hear that. So having gone through these 6 in order now, let's take them one at a time by going back to Anumana. Remember, Anumana is knowing after. And let's look at a chart. Now, you've made it through this part, thank God. And we can refer back to this chart, but over here, and I'm showing you actually the first class and the last class, because 4th class we'll look at the 6 proofs of Purusha, the Samkhya system's way of, it's kind of interesting, 6 proofs of truth in Advaita Vedanta, 6 proofs of truth in Samkhya. You can see how Advaita and Samkhya agree on almost everything. Maybe only one thing they don't agree on, but we won't digress here. Let's look at how it happens to people so it becomes more hands-on. And this is, of course, inspired by our old chant that all of us here, every one of us here in the room, know by memory. Let's chant it for live streaming audience, and if you're there, you can chant it with us. Om Sato ma Sadgamoya Tamaso ma Joitir Gamoya Mrichor ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshina Mukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. No, we're not ending the first half, nor are we starting all over. We are just giving you the Sanskrit for what's in this chart. And remember, we're following Anumana, right? Knowing after. So here's how lower knowledge, here's how higher knowledge occurs to us in stages. Because when Vivekananda came here in 1893, he heard that some people, like the Theosophists and other people, were using this chant. And they were interpreting it in English to say, we go from falsehood to truth. And he said, no, there's no such thing as falsehood. There's just lower truth. Everything is a form of lower truth. Even Mithya is a form of lower truth. You see, Mithya. What's Mithya? I went out in the street yesterday and I ran into the son of a barren woman. I don't believe you. You see, I don't believe that. That doesn't make sense to me. You have to think about it for a while. But that's an example of Michigan. It's false. Nobody's going to believe it, but it stops to make you think. How about the reflection in a mud puddle? You see, you don't think the moon is real. You see it in the mud puddle. You stick your finger there and it wobbles. You say, it's not the real moon, but it does cause you to look up and find the real moon. That's analogy, isn't it? So all of these, like space in a jar and all those kinds of philosophical examples they give you, are just helping the mind to keep from tripping over itself. It's not further confusion or fusion or further complexity. It's clarity. Your mind is saying it's confusion. I don't want to learn. It's the childish mind saying, oh, I don't want to go there. But actually, if you went there, you say, oh, I see now. And poof, doubt is gone like that, because doubt is not real. So the confusion that doubt caused you is therefore not real. See, you're allowing it to be real because you haven't applied some power that you have inside of you. I mean, these can be looked at not just as tools, but powers. And once you have them, they are powers. Before you have them, they're tools in order to acquire them. It's set your mind straight. We might be describing the mind of a philosopher or an intellectual or a jnani, but that doesn't mean the bhaktas don't think about this, or the meditators don't think about this, or those doing karma yoga don't think about this, because those kinds of beings are running into problems that the jnani has gotten rid of a long time ago. Jnana is the swiftest way to kill your ignorance. So you'll become a knower of Brahman in 6 months, Vivekananda said, if you take to the Jnana Yoga with a good teacher and adhere to it and study it deeply. Whereas bhakti is a long, slow boat, and meditation risky, see, because you're jumping from a low step to a high step, from earth to some sort of high samadhi without knowing the steps in between. And of course, karma yoga is fraught with dangers. Fraught with dangers. We were just talking today about how one of the swamis we know was a doctor. See, then he took sannyas. And then when he took sannyas, the order sent him to go out doctoring. So what was the difference? Why did he take sannyas? Before he was doing doctoring for money, and so forth, for making a living, dharmically. Afterwards, he was doing it for free and was giving all his service away. So it takes all the ego element out of it, you see, and it just frees you to do your service for God living in human beings. You might say you're not doing it for human beings anymore because they're always a mass of problems and they won't wake up. So you start serving God in them, that puts you on a better footing. Maybe they will waken. Maybe they'll begin to see these manifesting and start on the path. I have something to show you about that in a minute. So I don't digress at all. I'm actually explaining this process from avidya to aparavidya to paravidya to paramadvaita. So you go from avidya, ignorance, to lower knowledge, from lower knowledge to higher knowledge, from higher knowledge to I am that. Beyond knowledge to truth. So I was saying they were taking this asato ma sadgamaya, and they were saying we're going from falsity to truth, and Swamiji said, let's change that. Let's make it, we go from lower truth to higher truth. Because otherwise you're calling people a sinner, see. And they're going to start thinking that they're dust, you see. So, I was thinking about that the other day, and I said, we're from dust to dust and we go and everything. So I was saying, fine, if you're talking about just the body, I'll agree with you. You see, it's a few pounds of ash in the end, Holy Mother said. What's all this fuss about it? But people don't get over it for lifetimes. But that aside for now, if I was dust and I was knocking about the universe as a fleck of dust somewhere, and I happened to land on the holy feet of a devotee, then I would be the dust on the holy devotee's feet. Or maybe I'd land on my guru's feet. Then I'm not dust anymore, you see. Now I've got a purpose, I've reached a source, I've found my goal, and now I can align myself with the Mahat, you see. Because my body is now seen as an illusion, what I really am is a great mind. Your mind is a replica of the Mahat. That's what the Advaita sings. I could sing you the verse. Your mind is a replica of the Mahat. So if you think of your mind, not your brain, but your mind, as an eternal body, as a subtle body that goes all the way back to Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the Trinity, or to the Word, which is in the beginning, or to Hiranyagarbha, the great cosmic egg, or to Pradhana, the beginning of Prakriti in its unmanifested form, or any way you'd want to explain that, then all of a sudden you are eternal and you have a cosmic mind, you see. And you can take that all up with you when you meditate. Then your meditation's not risky, because you've got all the filling in between. You know, so, and some true non-duality will develop in you as you follow a track like this in phases. They're called avastas. And until that down here, you proceed either from outside in or by avastas. So that's on one side of the chart. On the other side, you see, you could say it this way: I'm going from false knowledge, which actually should slap me in the face, you see, like the son of a barren woman. Like Sri Ramakrishna told a story once, is that two men met on the street, and one said, "You know that old house in our neighborhood burned down?" He said, "Really, man?" So he ran in the store and bought a newspaper, came out saying, "You know, it's not here, so I don't believe you. You're lying to me." So his testimony is from a newspaper, and so he won't believe, you see. So this Mitchigan, this false knowledge that we get, sends us scampering for something higher. And that's what it's all about here. You can see here people who are in the throes of it, their actions are mindless, deluded, violent, harmful, spiteful, hateful, jealous, and evil. That's one cross-section of living being. Call them the demoniacal, as Krishna does in the Gita, because he doesn't mince words about it. And he's not all kid's glove about that cross-section of beings. What do you want? You want indifference to them. You don't want judgment, nor do you want to try and get down and fix them, as if that's ever going to happen with your tiny little powers. You want indifference. Don't strew pearls before swine, if you want to put it in that way. But then you can go to another level of being the agyanis, you see. Because you know how Sri Ramakrishna described this. An agyani doesn't know there's fire in wood. This is what this is saying up here. So he goes about the woods and he doesn't know how to start a fire or cook food, because he just sees wood. So he's a person who doesn't know that there's power in words, power in thoughts and ideas. There's even power in the 5 elements that isn't seen on the surface. So that's the agyani. But the gyani knows there's fire in wood, but he can't yet bring it out, you see. But the vijnani, he knows there's fire in wood. He can go light the fire, cook your meal, and feed it to you if he has to. So the vijnani is the ultimate jnani. And his knowledge is based on a combination of his own perception with verbal testimony, until he reached his own witness consciousness. And it doesn't depend on anyone or anything anymore. That's why Holy Mother said, in the end, everything disappears. The evil, the good, the gods, and God. They all disappear. And only my Divine Mother is left. That's how she put it. So there's only this primal power of Mahashakti. and who's one with Brahman, like fire in its heat, Sri Ramakrishna said. So that's a Vijnani's knowledge. So he's putting together all of this, but emphasis on highlights, you see, of these 6. He'll gravitate or elevate to several of these to prove to you the existence of God. It's just like it's not just an Anavi guru, but it's a Shambhavi guru who can actually, with his words, transmit to you the teachings. And he begins to do it earlier on when you listen. But then later on it's going to turn into a convincing power that will change your life. It'll in fact ruin your life first, your old life, and then give you an eternal life, as we know. So let's see what the Ajnani, I went ahead and explained this gauge to you and this gauge to you, because avidya is no knowledge or lower knowledge, combination of these two. Aparavidya is lower knowledge, paravidya is supreme knowledge, and then of course there's truth. So if you're at the level of an Ajnani, and I'm going from bottom up because this is a gradated path, then knowledge used merely for making a living occurs to you, followed by intellectualism for pleasure seeking and power. Sound familiar? A lot of people using their positions and their jobs, actually in a very kind of childlike way, as if nothing else existed, to make their way in the world. Hopefully dharmically they're doing it. But of course not always the case, because there's always temptations in this, because you don't have higher knowledge yet to check it against. This is where temptations come, take you off the path. My own father, working in this level, he got all his work stolen by his boss. Remember that. Turned him very bitter later on in life. So there's a lot of risks that go on when you're working with egos who are not invested yet with higher wisdom. So this is a very risky business here, the level of aparavidya. Scholarship to gain fame out of ambition, like the way you would use the 6 proofs of truth for argumentation, would be a good example, without knowing that maybe these should be connected, practiced, given to others for their own higher good, for free. And then teaching for selfish gain and profit. So here is where things change from aparavidya to paravidya. Right about there, then you see a shift. And actually right about here you see a shift. It's called this word, is it there? Altruism. See? That's right in the middle of the chart. So I have some sentences leading up to it and then some sentences after it. So you're going right to the middle of the cusp of higher wisdom when you reach there. But on the way there you find people preoccupied with details, facts and figures. They gather information for ego gratification to impress others. So far they've only entered into secular subjects gained for conventional means. So all of this is still worldliness is prominent. And you don't see them, like Sri Ramakrishna said, they don't speak about God even by accident to you. It doesn't occur to them yet. I'll show you that more clearly when we look at this next chart. Then it gets this knowledge utilized for altruistic motives. The reason that's important is that it turns away from small self, to selflessness. You're actually starting to think of others. So altruism, whereas Vedanta has said, particularly when it saw it in the West, that a lot of the altruistic modes of proceeding actually failed because the monies got siphoned off to lower powers. There was still a risk of these people getting a hold of their altruistic ideas and degrading them. So an altruism wouldn't be an ultimate solution in Vedanta, but if it has sincerity accompanying it, it would turn towards something higher. That would be these beings who actually were thinking of helping others would start to inform themselves better. You see, that is, they would go to maybe a source a teacher. And that starts by reading spiritual books for edification. I'm basing this on my own experiences in the Western culture over 69 years now, and how I saw it happening, because I made this shift when I was 19 and turned toward the Dharma and never looked back. And so I saw then, because I had a kind of witness consciousness developing in me, I saw how other people were doing it, some of them, and how a lot of people were not doing it, and what kept those people from not doing it away from doing it. And have a coverall term for that, Maya, Samsara, or you could call it Michigan or Avidya. It's just no charge in the magnet filing, you see. It's like a battery without acid. You can't charge it up again. So it's a very unfortunate situation or predicament that so many millions of people fall into that, when look at what they have inside of them to proceed, the stages of proceeding. Even just by assumption or presumption would be a stage of proceeding. But they won't presume to presume. And of course then you have to cite doubt and fear as another conclusion you would come to. I see they're doubting, and it's based in fear. See? So no one wants to step out, and take the lead of a family, or of a town, or a city, or a nation, or a country. That's why we love Swami Vivekananda, because as my teacher Swami Sheshananda said, peace be upon him, we love Vivekananda because he was a lion that left the cage. He wasn't satisfied to remain in the cage of convention, whether it be Hindu or American, or Western or Eastern, or with any other trappings like male and female, and so forth. Bhakti or Jnani, Bhakta or Jnani, he broke out of the bonds and let the cat out of the bag, which is another way of saying get the lion out of the cage. So if you read some spiritual books for edification, you might want to look back on your own upbringing, and when you first found the Gita, or when you first heard of Mahatma Gandhi, or of course I'm going back to the 60s and 70s where we were getting these books. But then later on, you started hearing about people more recently like Eckhart Tolle or Thich Nhat Hanh, or people that have grabbed the imagination of people in this country and maybe sent them on a little bit of a trajectory. Oh, they've realized it, so should I. So they're proceeding by analogy and similitude. I should be like them, see, and I should move forward. So you're getting some encouragement along there, and these great books helped, but not as much so as if you study them under a spiritual teacher. And many of us in that cross-section of people who came to know that there was spiritual life in the West, because we weren't given it by our parents. It wasn't enough for us, just hearsay. We wanted to find a source that could transmit it to us. And we ran into a few of them as our yearning increased. That's how Sri Ramakrishna would put it. How does a person find freedom? Back to the first step, it's you want to yearn to be free. So if you had sincere yearning somewhere in your past, which is a kind of knowing after, isn't it? You don't know yet, but you yearn, but you don't know what you're yearning for. And you have to define it along the way. And it has to be proven to you. The 6 proofs of truth will do that for you. So you find a spiritual teacher. And whereas you read the Gita in the 60s when you were 18 or 19, then in the late 70s you found a teacher and took a course on the Gita with that teacher. Wow, you see, your eyes were opened, you saw how deep it all went. You started memorizing slokas, they started imploding in your mind, and transformation of the mind started happening to you. And you gave up transformations of nature and transformations of the body and transformations of the senses and so forth. And you went to this seeking of a pure mind. That sincerity if it was in you, led you towards seeking a pure mind, and otherwise not, if it wasn't in you. That's why Sri Ramakrishna would even take people who were, addicted to the world, like Girish Ghosh in the beginning, and take him on as a student. But Girish Ghosh had sincerity. If another person had to come forward who was addicted to drink and womanizing and gambling, and they didn't have sincerity, Sri Ramakrishna wouldn't have taken them on. It's a dead battery syndrome. Go back for regrooving, as they used to say back in the 60s. So you'd have to have that sincerity present, and all of us in this room had it, and we've moved forward by it. That should be proof. If you'd add that in as a seventh proof real quick and send it to the rishis. See. But it's more like our own direct experience, you see. But it came from first, not knowing. And that's almost the first resembles the last. Knowledge isn't there, but since it isn't there, you know it exists. See. So the very first step connects back to the sixth. Only one is on the level of knowledge and the other is on the level of direct experience. You become the knower before you're looking for knowledge, or you're caught here in non-knowledge or lower knowledge. I think we can just finish this chart in the 10 minutes remaining. If you study the scriptures under a spiritual preceptor, then you teach spiritual disciples to sincere aspirants. And you can do this by your own bones, as Vivekananda called, Sri Ramakrishna told Swami Vivekananda. He said, I can't teach anyone, and Sri Ramakrishna said, just go there, your very bones will teach them. And so you can unwrap that statement if you like, but you can do it that way, or you can do it informally. The most natural way is just by using these tools inside yourself and emanating that truth with every word, thought, and deed that you do. Will become known to people. That's a slower way, but it will impress people over time, and they'll remember you. And maybe some of them will actually make a move towards awakening, real spiritual awakening in this lifetime. That's very rare few who know make that move to do it, but it does happen. Now this bridges into Paravid. So from avidya, just not knowing, to aparavidya, knowing in a lower sense, secular you might say, into Paravid. Paravid is, again, very rare. You don't see many people taking to it. That is, they'll hear the truth and they won't follow. Or they'll take just a little. Vivekananda said that about us. The Americans are ready for the scriptures of India, but they'll only take little amounts of it. You see, they won't give their whole life to it. And so, of course, we're finding that to be true, even in our own work here, SRV associations, that very few people come and commit fully to it. And how Vivekananda convinced thousands of Hindu men and women to give up the world and give themselves to the order, is just unbelievable. It is one of the two most amazing phenomena in spiritual life to ever happen to this world, the other being Lord Buddha, and how he spread the Dharma by his very presence across the world with no violence, actually accenting that it can't be done with violence. So those two things are amazing in this day and time, which is why we see the connection between Lord Buddha, which is 550 years prior to Jesus, and Swami Vivekananda, born in the 1800s. We think Vivekananda is just very much like a emanation of both Shiva and Buddha. So, looking back here for a second, Mithya Gyan turned into Agyan, Agyan turned into Gyan. But notice how these words, Pravritti Gyan and Nivritti Gyan, have been designated and assigned to true wisdom. Jnana is true wisdom. It's wisdom of something higher. And when you get on the trail of it, it attracts you, like a scent attracts a hound. The hound of heaven you've become that now. You're after that goal. And before that, it didn't make a lot of sense to you why you should be in the body and why you should be suffering and what the goal of existence was, other than pleasure, which is what these people have been sort of trapped in. So if you proceed along on that level, then you come to this time when pravritti gyan doesn't appeal to you anymore. Vivekananda has described that in contemporary times for us. It's just saying duty is the burning midday sun that heats and scorches the vitals of humanity. It's okay for a while. In the end, it's a morbid dream. It's a morbid dream. So duty, over and over again to us, you see, if it doesn't turn again towards some higher leaning, then it's going to be very heavy and preponderant and probably going to turn into a kind of tamasic life for us, and old age and decrepitness and no satisfaction in the whole thing. Like you're not getting essence from your experiences and taking them and making them your own knowledge like the Gyani would, you see. So I mean, you could sing that in true as Tulsidas did when he sang Itani vinati raghunandana se dukha dandva hamara bitaoji. Itani vinati raghunandana se dukha dandva hamara bitaoji. 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 Itani vinati raghunandana se. This is my prayer to thee, O Raghunanda. So what is Tulsidas's prayer to Raghunanda? Raghunanda is Ram, the great avatar of the Treta Yuga, Krishna's predecessor as an avatar. He's singing thousands of years after Ram has already passed from that incarnation. Tulsidas is still loving him, still writing, singing to him. And what's he asking him for? Kindly destroy my mind's tendency to perceive duality, and remove all sorrows and sufferings arising in my being, for only Atman abides. Nothing else exists. So he's come to the realization that only Atman exists, that only Brahman is. And that's now his own personal store of realization on the level of perception joined with proof. You see, a higher proof. So he's automatically, you could say, defaulted back to the position of an eternal source, an eternal life, as Jesus used to say. And he goes on to sing, I'm praying to you with folded hands, take me swiftly to the distant shore of blissful transcendence, beyond the ocean of delusion, where transitory existence is experienced again and again over many lifetimes in seemingly endless cycles. So he's put together the words of his song to Raghunanda very beautifully. And you might say he's a person that's done this already, graduated this process, or he's a person who came into the body with the 6 proofs of reality already ready and available. It's not even like having to go back and say, I'm using Anumana right now, you see. Or sitting in front of a teacher saying, I'm getting testimony. No, this is already paid forward in that soul, which it should be in all of us. And so that we can take care of any little indiscrepancy that might rise up in Maya, you see. And be able to smooth it out, you see. If you're having a bad hair day, then smooth it out, you see. So, a beautiful song by Kamalakanta and by Tulsidas to explain some of these seemingly dry philosophical axioms and principles in the moist way of devotion to wisdom. Shankara said that. He said, you criticize me for not having devotion just because I'm a Gyani, but my devotion is to knowledge, see, to Mother's knowledge, and to Krishna's knowledge, he said. Well, I think we've run out of time for this, but we had just bridged on the difference between pravritti gyan, knowledge of the world, and nivritti gyan, which means I renounce the world. It's knowledge that gives you nivritti. It takes away all vrittis. You're not thinking in your mind anymore about the world and its concerns. It doesn't mean you've lost your compassion. It means that you can actually breed true compassion now. Because before, your compassion was riddled by doubt and fear and secular pursuits, and thinking that actions were real, and thinking that the world was real, thinking that your family was real, and so forth. Now you're like hands-on, nivritti. My knowledge is now detached, it's mature, and now I can be a much greater help to the world. And that's what these beings have done for us when they've left behind such systems. So here, let's pause for 15 minutes, come back and finish up this chart and one other in the second half that has to do with this very first proof of truth we're talking about there, anumana, and how inference is so helpful in the early stages.